I still remember the day we started the company. 2 guys, 1 idea, and a garage that smelled like coffee, paint, and burnt circuits. His name was Tyler. Back then, he was my best friend. We had been college roommates, 2 broke kids with big dreams. We wanted to build something real, not just another tech startup that flared up and died. We wanted legacy. And for a while, that's what it felt like. We worked 20-hour days, living on ramen and instant coffee. Tyler handled the networking, the investors, the people part. I handled the engineering, the design, the code. We were a good team. I trusted him completely. The first time we signed a client contract worth 6 figures, we popped cheap champagne in paper cups and swore we'd never sell out. We even made a deal, 50-50 ownership, no matter what. That was our bond. But money does funny things to people, especially when one of them starts believing they deserve more than half. It started small. Tyler began taking calls I wasn't invited to, meetings with potential partners I'd only hear about afterward. He said they were just preliminary talks. Nothing serious. I wanted to believe him. But one night, after he left the office early, I noticed an envelope on his desk, half open. Inside was a letter from a real estate lawyer, addressed to him directly. It mentioned a purchase agreement. Our company's property, the office, the land, the whole building, was listed in the description. And his name was the one under seller. I froze. We'd bought that property together, split the payment 50-50. But when we incorporated the business, Tyler had volunteered to, quote, handle the legal paperwork, said it would save us time. I'd trusted him completely, signed whatever he gave me. That night, I pulled up the public property records online. My stomach twisted as I read it. Owner, Hale Tech Innovations. Managing partner, Tyler Hale. My name wasn't there, not once. I sat there staring at the screen, my hands shaking. Tyler had done it quietly, cleverly. On paper, it still looked like our business was equal, but the building, the deed, the real physical company we'd built from nothing, legally belonged to him. And that's when I understood. He wasn't planning to grow this company anymore. He was planning to sell it. The next morning, I confronted him. He walked in all smiles, holding his coffee like every other day. Morning, bro, he said. You look like hell. I didn't smile back. We need to talk. Uh-oh, he chuckled, setting his cup down. That sounds serious. You're selling the company's property. He blinked once, then gave a lazy shrug. Oh, you saw that, huh? You forged my consent, I said, my voice low. You know exactly what that means. He raised his eyebrows. Forged? Please. I didn't forge anything. You signed all the incorporation documents yourself. It's all above board, Mark. Don't play dumb, I said. We built this together. I know, he said, leaning back in my chair. My chair. And I appreciate that, but you've got to admit, I've been the one doing the heavy lifting lately. You sit behind that computer all day while I bring in the money. I clenched my fists. So this is your way of saying thanks? He smirked. Don't make this dramatic. I'm just taking us to the next level. The buyer's offering a good deal. He wants to acquire everything. The property, the assets, the patents. You'll still get a piece. Just smaller. Smaller? 30%. Maybe 25%, depending on the final valuation. I laughed bitterly. You're unbelievable. He stood up, straightening his suit jacket like some movie villain. It's business, Mark. You're the brains. I'm the face. You should have known how this works by now. I do, I said, my voice steady. I know exactly how this works. For a moment, he looked uneasy, maybe sensing something shift in my tone. But then he smirked again, tapping my shoulder as he passed me on the way out. Don't take it personally, man. It's just a better deal. When he was gone, I sat in silence. My whole body was shaking with anger, but underneath the rage was something colder. Clarity. Tyler thought he'd outsmarted me. That I'd be too emotional, too naive to fight back. But he forgot. Who wrote the code that runs everything we own? Who built the systems? Who knew the infrastructure down to the last bolt and byte? He might own the name on paper, but I own the soul of the company. That night, I didn't go home. I stayed in the office, staring at the framed photo of the two of us from our first trade show, smiling, hopeful, holding a banner that said, "Built on Trust." I almost laughed at the irony. Then, as the clock hit midnight, I started making calls. To lawyers. To the bank. To a very specific notary I'd met years earlier when we filed our first patent. And by sunrise, I had a plan. It wasn't loud, it wasn't flashy, but it was surgical. Tyler wanted to sell something that wasn't truly his. So I decided to make sure, legally, that it wouldn't belong to him ever again. When I say I didn't sleep that night, I mean it literally. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw his smirk, that arrogant grin that said, "You can't touch me." But I wasn't angry anymore. Not the wild kind of angry anyway. I was focused. Cold. I knew if I reacted emotionally, I'd lose everything. Tyler had played his hand first, but he hadn't expected me to know how to counter it. And that was his mistake. First thing the next morning, I went to see an old friend, Lisa, a corporate lawyer who used to share an office with us back when we were nobodies. She was one of those people who didn't say much, but when she did, it mattered. She raised an eyebrow when I told her what happened. "Your partner listed himself as the sole managing owner on the deed?" she asked, flipping through the scanned copies I'd brought. "Yeah," I said. "And he's negotiating to sell the company property behind my back." Lisa nodded slowly. "You still have access to the business accounts?" "For now." She leaned back in her chair. "Okay, you've got two problems. One, the property deed. Two, the company registration. He's used your trust against you. But that doesn't mean you're powerless." "Meaning?" She smiled slightly. "Meaning, if he's technically the only one listed as owner, then he's also the one with full liability." I frowned. "Liability?" "Yeah. If you file certain paperwork correctly, you can protect your assets and separate them from his decisions. But you'll need to move fast before the sale goes through." That's when the plan started forming in my mind. It wasn't just about stopping the sale anymore. I wanted to make sure that even if Tyler tried to move forward, he'd crash and burn. Legally, quietly, and without a clue it was coming. Lisa helped me draw up a list of what I'd need. New LLC formation papers, a revised deed transfer form, a holding entity name. And then came the question of what to name the new owner. I didn't want it under my name. That would make it traceable. I wanted something Tyler would never suspect. Something symbolic. That's when my dog, Rufus, walked over and dropped his slobbery tennis ball at my feet, tail wagging like he'd just solved the world's biggest problem. I stared at him for a few seconds. Then I laughed. "Lisa," I said, "what if the company property was transferred to someone, or something, who couldn't legally sell it back?" She narrowed her eyes. "What are you thinking?" "Rufus," I said. Her eyebrows shot up. "The dog?" "Exactly. On paper. As the trust beneficiary. I'll establish a property trust in his name. I'll be the trustee, but legally, the asset belongs to him. Meaning, Tyler can't sell it. Ever." Lisa grinned. "That's insane." "Insane enough to work?" She thought for a moment, then nodded. "With the right paperwork and timing? Yes, it could work." So we did it. We drafted the documents quietly over the next few days. Tyler had no clue what I was doing. In fact, he was too busy planning his next investor dinner, bragging about how he was about to make a life-changing deal. Meanwhile, I was sitting in front of the notary's office with Rufus in the passenger seat, his tongue hanging out, drool on the window. The clerk at the counter looked at me like I was joking when I handed her the trust paperwork. "You're transferring property ownership to a dog?" "Yes," I said calmly. "Through a trust. It's all in order." She blinked, then shrugged. "Not the weirdest thing I've seen this week. We got the signatures, the stamps, the official state registration. It was all legitimate." By the time the ink dried, Rufus Hale Trust owned 100% of Hale Tech's physical property. And I was the trustee, the only person allowed to make decisions on its behalf. Tyler didn't notice a thing. He was too busy negotiating, too busy playing the big shot. At one point, he even strutted into my office, wearing a new designer watch. Got a big meeting tomorrow, he said with that same smug grin. We're going to be rich, Mark. Hope you're ready for early retirement. Yeah, I said, typing away at my laptop. I'm ready. That night, I went home and poured myself a drink. I sat on the couch next to Rufus, patting his head while watching the flickering city lights outside. Congratulations, buddy, I murmured. You're now a property owner. He barked once as if he understood, but I wasn't celebrating yet. The next phase would be tricky. I had to let Tyler think the sale was going smoothly while I quietly positioned myself for the reveal. A few days later, I intercepted an email thread between Tyler and the potential buyer. The sale agreement was scheduled to finalize the following Friday. 5 days. 5 days until he discovered that the deed he thought he controlled wasn't his to sell. So I waited. I played along, smiled when he bragged, acted dumb when he threw financial terms around like he was the next Elon Musk. By Thursday night, he invited me to the celebration dinner before the deal closed. I showed up, smiled politely, and listened as he gave a toast. To new beginnings, he said, and to loyalty that pays off. I raised my glass and met his eyes across the table. To loyalty, I said quietly. He didn't notice the irony. But the next day, when the buyer's lawyer walked into the county office to verify the deed, Tyler's perfect plan fell apart. The name on the ownership file didn't read Tyler Hale. It read Rufus Hale Trust. And the trustee of record was me. I was at my desk when I got the call from Tyler. His voice was shaking with rage. What the hell did you do, Mark? Just taking care of business, I said evenly. You had no right, he shouted. That's fraud. No, I said calmly. It's not. The transfer was legal, witnessed, notarized, and filed with full authorization. You can't. I can, I interrupted. And I did. He was silent for a long time. I could almost hear his breath heavy through the phone. Finally, he said, You think this is funny? No, I said. I think it's justice. Then I hung up. Rufus barked in the background, tail thumping against the floor. It was the first time in weeks that I truly smiled. Tyler didn't go quiet for long. Within 2 days, he showed up at my office, looking like he hadn't slept. His expensive suit was wrinkled, his hair messy, and his ego, that thing he wore like armor, had cracks all over it. He slammed the door behind him. We need to talk, he growled. I didn't even look up from my computer. We're talking. What the hell did you do, Mark? I sighed and leaned back in my chair. I protected what was mine, what was ours, before you tried to screw me over. He jabbed a finger at me. You can't just take a company out from under your partner. You mean like you tried to? I asked calmly. Except, unlike you, I did it legally. Tyler clenched his jaw. I can undo this. Good luck, I said. You'll have to convince the state to revoke a legally filed trust, with notarized documentation and a valid trustee. Oh, and the owner's name is Rufus. You'll have to take that up with him. He blinked, confused. Rufus? My dog. For a second, he thought I was joking. Then he saw the faint grin on my face and realized I wasn't. You're insane, he muttered. Maybe, I said. But I'm also the only one still employed here. He laughed bitterly. You really think this will hold up? The buyer's lawyers are already looking into it. Once they see what you pulled, you'll be the one in trouble. That's fine, I said, standing up, because while they're looking into it, the sale's frozen. No signatures, no cash transfers, no handshakes. The deal's dead until ownership is verified. He glared at me, breathing hard. You just cost us millions. No, I said evenly. You did, when you tried to sell something that wasn't yours. He stormed out, slamming the door so hard a picture fell off the wall. Rufus, who was lying by my desk, lifted his head and gave a low, questioning bark. It's fine, buddy, I said softly. Let him stew. The next week was chaos. I could feel the tension in every email, every phone call. Tyler was scrambling, reaching out to lawyers, accountants, anyone who would listen. But the deed had already been verified by the county clerk's office. It was airtight. He sent me texts at 2 a.m. "You're making a mistake. You'll regret this. You think this is funny?" I ignored every single one. Instead, I focused on stabilizing the company. I called clients, reassured employees, and made sure operations continued smoothly. Tyler might have been the loud one, but I'd always been the one who actually kept things running. By midweek, the buyer's lawyer finally contacted me directly. A calm voice on the phone said, "Mr. Hale, we've reviewed the documents. It appears you are the legal trustee for the property in question." "That's correct," I said. "Your partner was unaware of this transfer?" "Completely." There was a long pause. Then the lawyer said, "Then the sale cannot proceed. We'll be withdrawing our offer effective immediately." "Understood." Tyler must have gotten the same call, because 10 minutes later he was back at my door, angrier than before. "You killed the deal!" he shouted. "No," I said again, calm as ever. The truth did. He grabbed a chair and threw it across the room. "You don't get it!" This was my future. "Your future?" I snapped, standing up for the first time. "Tyler, I built this company with you. We started it in your garage, remember? I skipped rent payments, sold my car, worked nights to get this off the ground. And you were going to sell it out from under me for a quick payday?" He stopped shouting. He just stood there, breathing hard, eyes darting around the room like he was searching for a way out. Then he said quietly, "You don't understand. I needed the money." "For what?" He hesitated. Then it came out. Debt. Apparently, he'd gotten mixed up in something bad. Investors, side deals, a gambling problem. I wasn't sure which part was true and which was another one of his lies. But it didn't matter. "Tyler," I said quietly, "you didn't need to destroy everything we built to solve your problems." He ran his hands through his hair. "So what now? You've got the deed. You win. Happy." I shook my head. "It's not about winning. It's about protecting what's right." He scoffed. "Don't give me that moral crap. You just wanted revenge." I looked him dead in the eye. "No, I wanted peace." He sneered. "You'll never get it. Not while I'm still here." And then he left. For the next few weeks, he tried everything. He filed complaints, threatened lawsuits, even tried to convince some of the employees to turn against me. But none of it worked, because every move he made only proved one thing, that he was desperate. And desperation has a smell. Everyone could sense it. Clients stopped returning his calls. Employees stopped trusting him. Eventually, he started skipping work altogether. One day, I got an email from his personal address. It was short. "You think you're clever, but I'm not done." I deleted it. Then, just to be safe, I called Lisa. "He's going to try something stupid," I told her. She sighed. "Let him. You've got the legal high ground, and the public record's in your favor. But if he starts making threats, call the police." "I'm not afraid of him," I said. "I know," she replied. "But you've got a company to protect, and a dog that technically owns half of it." That made me laugh for the first time in days. But deep down, I knew she was right. Tyler was cornered, and when a man like that feels trapped, he does unpredictable things. The next morning, my prediction came true. I walked into the office to find 2 police officers standing by the front desk. Tyler was sitting there with a smug look on his face. "Mr. Hale," one officer said to me, "we received a report claiming you falsified company documents and committed fraud." Tyler leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. "Told you I wasn't done." I felt my heart race, but only for a second. Then I smiled. "Officers," I said, pulling out my phone. "Before you go any further, would you like to see the notarized documents, the filing date, and the confirmation email from the state registrar?" They exchanged glances. "That would be helpful." I handed over everything. Within minutes, they realized the report was bogus. Tyler's smirk faded. "Sir," one officer said to him, "filing a false police report is a serious offense." Tyler's jaw dropped. "Wait, Save it," the officer said. "You're coming with us." They escorted him out of the building while half the office stared in stunned silence. When they were gone, I sat down at my desk and finally exhaled. Rufus' picture sat on my monitor, his goofy grin reminding me of how ridiculous this all was and how perfectly poetic it had turned out. But I knew Tyler wasn't done. Not yet. He was too proud to give up completely, and I had one more card left to play. One final move that would ensure he never came near the company again. Tyler's arrest wasn't the end. Not even close. He was released the next day on a technicality. It wasn't enough to keep him locked up, but it was enough to damage what was left of his reputation. Still, I knew him well enough to realize that humiliation would only make him more dangerous. And sure enough, he came back swinging. 2 days later, I started receiving emails from vendors and clients. Vague, worried notes about internal conflicts and, quote, legal instability. One even said, "Tyler told us the company might dissolve soon. Should we pull out of the next shipment?" That was when I knew. He was trying to burn the place down from the outside. If he couldn't win, he'd make sure I lost too. But I'd been preparing for this. Lisa had already helped me file for emergency protective measures on the company's intellectual property and brand name. In simple terms, even if Tyler tried to register a new company or steal our clients, he wouldn't be able to use the same logo, business model, or name. I also moved all digital assets to a new secure domain, under Rufus Hale Trust Holdings. Every file, every document, every license. Legally speaking, the company didn't even exist under Tyler's jurisdiction anymore. Still, he kept trying. He called me once late at night, voice shaking with fury. "You think you've won, don't you?" "I don't think," I said quietly. "I know. You ruined me, Mark. Do you hear me?" "No," I replied, calm as ever. "You ruined yourself. I just stopped you from ruining anyone else." He went silent. Then he said something I'll never forget. "You're not better than me. You're just quieter about it." Then he hung up. After that call, I didn't hear from him for a while. Weeks passed. The office began to feel normal again. The staff started smiling. Productivity returned, and even Rufus became a sort of unofficial mascot around the building. I started bringing him in twice a week. He'd wander from desk to desk, tail wagging, making everyone laugh. It reminded me of what we'd built before. Greed poisoned it all. But peace never lasts long when your enemy is both bitter and desperate. It was a Friday evening when I got a text from Lisa, "Turn on Channel 5 News." Now, I did, and there he was. Tyler, standing outside a local news station, giving an interview. He was waving papers around, claiming he was the true founder of the company, accusing me of embezzlement and calling me a fraud. My blood ran cold, not because I was scared, but because I could already see the headlines forming. I knew how quickly a lie could spread before the truth caught up. I called Lisa immediately. "Can we shut this down?" She sighed. "Not directly. It's his word against yours, unless you want to go public." "I don't." "Then there's only one way to end this quietly," she said. "You have to make him self-destruct." That night, I thought about what she said, and that's when I realized I could do exactly that. Over the next few days, I reached out to the same people Tyler had tried to sell the company to, the investors he'd lied to. I told them the truth, calmly, backed by documented proof, but I didn't stop there. I told them something else, that I had evidence Tyler had used their money to pay off personal gambling debts. Now, to be clear, I didn't lie. I had no proof of his gambling, but I did have records showing multiple large transfers from his business account to private entities registered in Las Vegas. It didn't take much imagination for them to connect the dots. Within a week, those investors started digging on their own, and when they found irregularities, they turned on him. Hard. He tried to call me again, but this time I didn't answer. Instead, I showed up at his house. It was the first time I'd seen him since he was escorted out of the office by police. The once flashy exterior was gone. He looked smaller, older, defeated. The luxury car he loved so much wasn't even in the driveway. When he opened the door, he looked stunned to see me. "What do you want?" he asked, his voice hollow. "I want to end this," I said. "For good." He laughed bitterly. "You already ended it. You took everything." "I didn't take it," I said softly. "You gave it away." He stared at me, eyes burning with resentment. "You think this feels good? Watching me fall apart?" I shook my head. "No, Tyler. What would feel good is knowing you finally learned something." He looked like he wanted to say something cruel, something to twist the knife, but then his shoulders sagged. "What do you want from me?" he asked quietly. "Sign this," I said, holding out a folder. He frowned, opening it. It was a formal separation agreement. It released him from any association with the company. No ownership, no profit share, no claim. "Why would I sign this?" he asked. "Because if you don't," I said calmly, "I'll forward every email, every transfer record, every contract with forged signatures to the IRS and the Department of Justice. You'll be broke and in prison." His hand trembled as he looked down at the papers. Then, after a long pause, he said, "You're colder than I thought." I met his eyes. "No, just smarter than you gave me credit for." He signed. Slowly. Silently. When he handed the folder back, I could see tears in his eyes. Not sadness. Anger. "You think you're some kind of hero, Mark? You think people will remember you as the good guy?" "No," I said, turning toward the door. "I just hope they remember you as a warning." I left him standing there, alone in his empty house. That night, I sat in my living room with Rufus beside me, a glass of whiskey in hand. The company was finally mine. Legally, morally, completely. Tyler couldn't touch it. He couldn't even say its name without facing a lawsuit. But even with all that victory, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt calm. Sometimes justice isn't about making someone pay. It's about making sure they can never hurt you again. Rufus lifted his head and rested it on my knee, looking up at me with those soft brown eyes. "Don't look at me like that," I said, smiling faintly. "You're the real CEO now, remember?" He wagged his tail once, then settled back down. And for the first time in months, I actually felt like I could breathe again. But there was still one last thing I needed to do, something poetic. Something that would seal the story forever. The day everything felt finished was quiet, in a way I'd never expected. Not loud, not triumphant, just a gentle kind of ending, like the last page of a book sliding closed. I'd spent the morning in meetings, finalizing the signed paperwork that made the separation official, answering calls from the last few worried clients, and signing forms that transferred certain holdings into a small employee trust. It wasn't charity, it was practical, a way to make sure the team we'd built wouldn't be at the mercy of a single greedy man again. By lunchtime, the office hummed with normal work. People focused, keyboards clicked, and Rufus lay in his usual spot by the window, half asleep. He'd earned his nap. He'd also earned his status. Not because he'd done anything but be himself, but because the world had a strange sense of humor, and I'd chosen to use it. That afternoon, I called a press person I trusted and asked for a short statement. I didn't want a circus. I wanted clear facts, nothing theatrical. The short release said the company's ownership structure had been adjusted for legal protection, that the managing partner had voluntarily severed ties, and that the board, now staffed with people who'd been here through the rough years, would steer the company forward. No gossip, no insults, just the truth. At 3, I walked Rufus down to the small courtyard by the building. A few people from the staff gathered, curious when they learned what I planned. I kept it simple. I brought a small plaque I'd had made, engraved, clean and plain. On it, "Rufus Hale Trust, protector of our home." No jokes, no press release flair, just a line that made people smile. I read a short thing aloud. Nothing dramatic, just a few sentences I'd written on the back of an old invoice. This company began in a garage with 2 people who wanted to build something honest. We lost our way when greed came in, but we found our way back because people inside this room chose to keep building. Today we make sure the place where we work is protected for those who actually make it run, the team. Rufus is a symbol of that promise. There were a few quiet claps. Rufus wagged and sniffed at the plaque like he was inspecting a new bone. Someone took a picture. Someone else brought him a treat. It felt small and right. Word moved through the city like water. Tyler tried one last attempt. A lawyer's letter claiming the transfers were improper and asking for a reversal. I forwarded it to the company counsel with a short note. "We have legal coverage. Proceed." That was that. The letter went nowhere. The investors who'd been circling when Tyler smelled blood backed off when they saw the board's resolve and the legal papers. They didn't want drama. Most of the clients stayed. A few left quietly, and that was fine. We'd rather be smaller and honest than rich and rotten. A week later, I found him. Not in some dramatic showdown. I ran into Tyler at a small diner on the edge of town, the place he used to brag about to friends when we were young. He looked thinner, not just in body, but in spirit. He saw me, and for a moment something unreadable passed over his face. Regret, maybe. Shame, maybe. Pride, not likely. We didn't yell. He stood up, offered a hand. I took it. You did what you had to, he said, voice low. You chose what you wanted to be. I answered. He was quiet after that, and then he left. No threats, no tears. Just a man walking out of a script he'd written himself. Months passed. The company settled into a new rhythm. I kept Rufus's name in legal documents, not as a joke, but as a barrier. A reminder that ownership isn't always about titles. It's about care, stewardship, and who shows up when the work is hard. People joked, clients asked about the dog owner, and I'd smile and explain, simply, that sometimes the law can be used for good, to protect the people who matter. On slow evenings, I'd bring Rufus to the old garage where we'd started. It smelled the same. Oil, gasoline, the ghosts of late nights. I'd sit on the concrete step and remember that kid we both used to be. Hopeful, hungry, stubborn. I felt grateful that we hadn't lost the thing we built. I felt grateful that I'd been clever enough and patient enough to stop a bad ending. I never made a big scene. I didn't need to. The deed change was legal, the trust was set up right, and the company was safe. The office staff got bonuses that year. We set up a small fund for anyone who needed emergency help. The people who'd kept faith with the work felt seen. Rufus slept at my feet through all of it. He was an ordinary dog who unwittingly became a guardian. He didn't care about titles or contracts. He cared about walks and treats and the exact right place to sit in the sun. The last line of my story isn't dramatic. It isn't cinematic. It's quiet. One evening, Rufus and I walked down to the little park by the river. He chased a stick. I watched him run, tongue-lolling, joy in every step. I thought about Tyler and the choice he'd made, about how easy it is to confuse cleverness with virtue. I thought about the company and the people who'd chosen to stay and rebuild. I bent down, scratched Rufus behind the ear, and said, "You're the best partner I ever had." He wagged like he agreed. Then we walked home, simple and steady, the city lights coming on, one by one. My name was on the paperwork where it mattered. Rufus's paw print would be on the plaque for years. And the man who'd tried to sell what we built had been stopped. Not with fury, but with wit, law, and a mind that refused to be fooled. That's the thing about justice. Sometimes it's loud, sometimes it's quiet. Mine was quiet, practical, and, when it needed to be, a little ridiculous. But it worked. And in the end, that was enough.